Bennett. Adona in Shenigi, Kinyani Nishne, Do Tkodicini, Washichin, Bit Anidashe, Ado, Kazasana Dashanada, Lay Tehelina and Asha, Ado Tsena and Jihidishibando, Adikech, Office of Navajo Government Development Nationalist Policy Analyst Nishne. Ado, I just want to take time to introduce my colleagues, Damon Clark, who's back there. He's a policy analyst with the Office of Government Development. And our executive director, Mr. Harrison Sosi, he's here with us today, so just wanted to acknowledge them. Although the topic about land and recognizing fundamental law, and one of the things we do in fundamental law is Nits'áá, their recognition too, so we just wanted to acknowledge former Councilman Beshwan Sa'ana Raymondsman, wanted to acknowledge him, and Ado Nits'áá, Mr. Chief Justice Emeritus Urbiazi. So here, so today we wanted to have the discussion about Diné, the Nihikeyah, the Nihikeyah, how do you integrate fundamental law into the net land governance? And we do that, what was taught by, I guess, my cohort too, or myself. I went to school at Navajo Prep, and then I graduated, came here to the Net College, and completed the bachelor's in Diné studies. So we're sort of like Padawans with all these Jedis as teachers, from our professors, from our language teachers, and our culture teachers. They're teaching us a lot of those sort of teachings, and how do we integrate it within our daily practices as we go into the workplace, leave the school, or continue with the school. And so we wanted to take the time to, let's see here, talk a little bit about fundamental law, and we left some material there in the back for you, because some of the times as students, when you do these research, you try to always look for resources. You always try to look for where did this knowledge come from? Where did we have to cite it back to? As far as our evidence, as our resources. So we left a little bit of material there about CN-69-02, which is the Diné Hazani, and it was recognized in 2002 by the Navajo Nation Council, and it was passed 45 in favor, 4 opposed, and 1 abstained, and this happened November 1st of 2002. Then a couple days later, President Kelsey Billey at the time signed the same fundamental laws into law on November 13th, 2022. So if you would like a copy, it's there up front. And we also have other material that we'll be talking about throughout the presentation too. And one of the things mentioned throughout today is Nihikeyah, all our Katnas, Navajo, and our chapter houses, our communities, all of them in Navajo, written in Navajo, and also what they have commonly known as Nits'áá, the treaty. So some information about the Treaty of 1868 and how it relates to our land and some of our governance within land policies. And last week during the Navajo Nation Spring Session, on Wednesday I believe, they recognized Nihikeyah, all the women leaders that were there that served the council, and that they mentioned today Nihikeyah, ídahwiil'aah as being one of them, and all the women that served on the council. And so you can pick up material there for you that is available for you. And so as we look at this law, there's some key elements that come out of it as immutable laws provided by the Diné to preserve, protect, and enhance the net way of life, the net beda'inani, and one thing that really sticks out on there is the whereas clause 4, where it states, the knowledge of these fundamental laws is fading, especially among our young people. And that kind of really got us thinking about the presentations we saw here today from the cohort, the Nest Studies bachelor's degree program. We're seeing this shift of incorporating our language and our culture. We're seeing a hunger among our young people We're seeing the need among a Chinado of wanting to learn the language, wanting to learn the culture, and where to get that knowledge from, who has access to that information. So we're seeing this shift in this whereas clause 4 of understanding that. And also ensure the incorporation of these fundamental laws within the Navajo Nation Code. So if you hear during the council session, you'll hear references to NNC and what that means, the abbreviated term for the Navajo Nation Code. And it's the need to learn, practice, and educate the Diné fundamental laws. And we go into it a little bit today. Within the 4 areas that it recognizes, Nits'áá traditional law, Diné customary law, natural law, which we're going to cover a little bit today about what it entails and some of the detailed aspects of what it incorporates in it. And the last, common law. So today, as we talk about Diné land governance, we understand the relationship between and the relationship that it shares among the spiritual form, the ceremonial form, and the traditional form of our Father Sky, of the universe, and how it's in relation with Nits'áá, Mother Earth, and its duality between the two, and how life continues to progress for future generations. So in these areas, we talk about Nihikeyah, our culture, our Navajo way of life. And what was mentioned today was the relationships between the male spiritual forms and the female spiritual forms. And between that, there's a process, there's a natural order that happens when these two come together, that work together, the relationships that they share between one another. And out of that is sort of the outcome, the results of what we see from it, the nurturing and sustaining life to progress, to go on, and utilizing the elements that we talk about here today, Nits'áá, our Mother Earth, the land that's incorporated with it, the water, and this is from different scientific states of a liquid, of a gas, and from a solid to ice. So there's a transformation that goes on. We recognize these different leaders within natural law and within the natural elements. The different aspects of the male and female winds, the male and female rain that are associated between the two. And Kolagi, not only just the fire, but something that our executive director talks about, Mr. Sosi, a place of warmth, a place to shelter, somewhere to go to in order to sustain, heal your body, and taking care of your body. And throughout all these elements, one of the things that's associated with Nits'áá is the kadadin. Kadadin is the corn pollen that nurtures and sustains these life elements to continue going on. But we have to be reminded, there's these elements that exist within our natural order, but they themselves have a way of discipline. They themselves has a way of order, of that firmness, of that hashke, that strict teaching that are associated with it. Not to mess around with the fire, not to play with the water, not to disturb certain areas and even pollute things, or that natural order of consequentialism comes into effect, where there's a disturbance in the Astan, or there's a disturbance in Yadidhid. So with these, it's associated with Bahat Eholom, Be'etz Kisholom, Hashkeholom, associated with each of these within the natural order and the natural process within Nihikeyah, Do Beda'inani. And so here you can see some of the Google Maps behind it, and some of the areas that we've identified of where the placements within our, our Navajo Nation flag, and some stories that are associated with Nits'áá, Nihikeyah. So again, with these Diné land governance, sometimes we see governance just as the human spectrum of people, laws, but we also have to integrate, there was laws within the mountains, there was leaders within the mountains, there was governance there. And it started, Shapik Echo from the east and working its way throughout the day, Sisna Nits'áá and Nihikeyah, the strength of the East Mountain, the strength of the white shell, the strength of the thinking, critical thinking. So when you hear the prayer today, it encompasses all of those elements of how we think, of how we critically understand things. And we pray to the Sisna Jenetsol Zitol Sleep, the Bensa, Zitnal Ditli Jitol. We pray to these leaders of mountains, land governance, and we acknowledge, give us the strength for critical thinking, give us the strength for planning, give us the strength for life, give us the strength for reflection, evaluation, and then within the two, we recognize this. So if you visualize this in your mind of one of our structures, the male structures and the pillars of these mountains incorporate that and the same thing is associated with the Tzitbiyin. The Tzitbiyin is another area of reference that we go to within land governance. And so forth. Through this song, it's telling you the placements of Sisnajin, Yotkei, and Sahakest. Then you go to where Grant is, Solzit, and the association with Dog Ish, Aro Nahata. Then you go towards Flagstaff, San Francisco Peaks, Dog Kosti, Di Chitlit, the abalone shell, Ina, the way of life, and bringing up life, growth, Ano Setegi, and the Bensa, towards Colorado, and the association with Bashini, Adol Sihasan, and two in the middle, Zitnal Ditli, Yoda Asay Chetin, Adol Zitchoin, and is a Asay Chiladezi. So with recognition of these different areas, there's governance there, Nahata, and the teachings that we have within the family home of different communities that associate this within different stories and different teachings. And at the family level, something that we see is the Tzit'áá and the importance of Tzit'áá governance, of how each of these mountains are incorporated within the Tzit'áá for the protection and the mindset of the home to carry on future generations, to carry on the family, to continue to grow, to continue to know where their home is, and to always remember the stories that are associated within their community, within their clan system, within their family unit. So this Tzit'áá is another important object that is not only respected, but it's very important for future generations today to know the stories about their Tzit'áá, or to ask questions with a Chedo, a Masana, a Nelake, and ask some of these questions about why it's important to understand these concepts with Tzit'áá, Tzit'áá, and the associations from the east to the south to the west to the north, and the two in the middle. And as you described earlier today, within these own areas, different families have different stories associated with it. So, as students, as you research some of these topics, or you have these discussions in your Diné studies class, maybe go home, or after the symposium, maybe call Chedo Amasana, or this weekend as you go back home, ask some of these questions to them. Maybe they have answers, and maybe some of them don't know, but you know somebody who would be willing to talk to you about those things. So, all of this information that we presented today all came from either a family member, a grandparent, a friend, or even our teachers. So, how do we incorporate all of these teachings together to understand some of these concepts? And so, we hear this term a lot within different areas, different atmospheres, and different environments. And we learn through our research at government development is today we hear the word Diné, and you wonder, where's the rest of that term? And we know it was longer. So when we hear but over the years, we said, oh, that's too long. We need to shorten it. So today we hear Diné. But if we go back to the understanding of the surface that's there, more of referencing that holy reverence, understanding that being that existed. The five fingered, their existence, who we are, divinities of the earth. And some of the teachings that are associated with it goes back to how we are able to sustain ourselves and our well-being, sustain some of the areas that we talked about within the net land governance, and some of the protocols that exist that are incorporated with it. Going to what we observed this past Monday with Earth Day. Every day we hear comments of every day should be Earth Day, and picking up some of the trash that you see in your community, and as you go on your walk, or you're looking at all your studies and you just want to take a walk outside, and you probably run across pop can or trash, being able to have that mindset, the conservation of the land that existed there, and the disturbance that also exists there, being able to take that, to restore that back to its original self, its original being. That's where the responsibility comes in of stewards of the earth, stewards and the divinities that have a responsibility. We reference in our creation stores, also the other one, the glittering world. And as the divinities left they left, that responsibility of governance was given to you are now responsible for this earth. You are now responsible for this land. So how do you incorporate those understandings of when that responsibility was given to be stewards, to be caretakers, to be, in a way, protectors? We see different tribal communities of their protecting their way of life, protecting their natural resources. And you also have Nits'áá, how that natural environment once existed before human existence, before the natural elements, and how that was created. As we go along, every 4 years during election time, you hear about overgrazing, you hear about the feral horse issue, and how does that play a role within being stewards of the earth, of taking care of that natural environment? With all this runoff that we're getting from the snowmelt now, where does all that water go? And where does that conservation, sustainability play a role into us as earth surface beings? How do we able to contribute to keep some of those resources still here within our communities and be stewards within the context of Diné Hazani? And so as you see here, we see these different areas, and sometimes when we reference the land, Also recognize the importance of the universe. Also recognize the importance of air. And you see in the universe, there's resources there too. The moon, also. That plays a role within the stories and the teachings, and also the constellations and Nahokons. The association with these different teachings are also incorporated within the resources that existed there. The other aspect of the resources with the sun, the sun rays that exist that bring certain nutrients into the earth, and that brings heat, that brings warmth. But also even the birds, the Diné, those different aspects of those family units that all are incorporated within this area. And the oxygen, the hydrogen, the different elements that existed. And one of the things that we ran across this week was we were learning about, what is the Navajo name for carbon? What is the Navajo name for hydrogen? And we were doing our research, and we saw something coming across it, and we saw hydrogen, is what they said. Carbon, is what they said. So when you hear these terms that are referencing within language, where does that play a role within fundamental law of incorporating some of these new words into our language? And what were some of the teachings that associated with it long ago? Then you go to the earth's surface level. All these different resources that we see exist at the surface. But it has roots. Same thing for us that was described today. Adone, Kehwins and where are those roots within our community? Where are those roots within the net land governance? And so as we acknowledge that there's other beings that have sort of their way of governing, their way of understanding the net land governance, the four-legged beings that exist out there, Shashton, Nashtui, all these different animals that roam the land, that have their own dwelling, that have their own source of food. The food that they eat and the nutrients that provides for them, that helps them grow, that sustains the next generation for their growth too. The plants and the foliage that exists within some of these different areas. And also the waters, the streams, the natural flows that exist within mountains, the hills, the rivers, all there. The ecosystem that exists within these beings, within these plants, within these waters, within the soils, there's an ecosystem there. So one of the areas that we saw was once you take out one of our relatives, or once you take out one of these beings, they're also known as keystone species. And once you take that keystone species out, how does that affect the natural ecosystem that existed there? How does that sort of lead to consequences? If something is taken, if something is removed, what is it going to do to the other relatives within those areas? And also the last part of ídahwiil'aah adone, that was mentioned earlier. There's different lands of communities that have kía'anik ídahwiil'aah aro twidichinik ídahwiil'aah, and what is their governance there? What is their structure that existed there? And with that, as beings, being able to utilize your hands, the crafts that was made, the tools that were once made with the natural environment that they had. If they were in a wooded area What tools could they use for the wood? If they were down in the canyons, what could they use with the tlej, the hushkish, the mud? What objects could they utilize within their natural environment and bring that to the table within different communities, different clan systems? And so you see here, what we see a lot within our teachings, na da, na yize, na to, na oshe, the corn, the squash, the tobacco, and the beans. And within each of these, it all comes back to what we talk about within our historical findings of Anasazi, commonly known, Anna Nihikeyah. So when you take that word and you break it apart, Anna Nihikeyah, Anna na da, na yize, na to, na oshe, where does that stem from within language? Anna, na. And where does it go back to within the historical sense? So, one of the things that we've overlooked sometimes, or we forget about, or isn't really taught about, is respecting these land elements. Yer is nish. How do we able to respect some of those offerings that existed in certain areas? The corn pollen offerings and being able to give thanks. When you see chilnan set, when you see azet, chilazet, and you put down your kadadin, you first make that offering to that plant species, and you extract from those certain areas. Yat ego ndahadet olet atin, bekak ondahadegit ara hot ego ndahadet olet. You lay that offering there for that plant, and for it to heal, for it to sustain, for it to nurture. So that's another area to understand. Give, in order to always want to receive, there's that reciprocity to that exchange there that happens. Sometimes we tend to overlook and take, but we overlook to give that offering, to give back of what that plant means, to give back to what this sacred area is for, to lay those prayers there. So how are we able to give back to these areas? Is not nil. Again, is following that natural protocol and offerings, practices that occurs, being mindful of natural law, within fundamental law of following some of these protocols. And if you don't know who to reach out to, who has that knowledge, and to learn from that individual, because it really stems back to preserving the beauty of that natural world, preserving what was that natural environment like beforehand. And so, as we understand is that responsibility, right? Nas, nano yet, our growth as a people, our growth within the natural environment. Adahojinya, our own well-being, the well-being of the other relatives, the well-being of the other plants, the lands that exist. What is their well-being? Besna, what is the prosperity of not only our communities, of a nation, of a Navajo nation, but what is the growth and the prosperity of a nation? What is the growth and prosperity worldwide? Being stewards, being human beings, taking that bold step to understand those concepts of what does the prosperity look like worldwide? Because we are also a part of nature. We're a part of that ecosystem. There's that sacred bond of love and respect that happens within these different areas. And so with that, you have that love for your community. You have that love for the teachings and the stories that were shared with you. So there's a bond created there. We don't have possession of our Mother Earth. We don't have possession of our Father Sky. We don't own our mom, so to speak. We don't own our father. We work, we cooperate with one another. Of our responsibility to steward this earth and for future generations to come down the road. And so just being mindful of time, of ways to learn of how we'll be able to understand areas of sort of our call to action as students, as leaders, as teachers. What is our call to action when we talk about Diné land governance? And we learned about place-based learning, about learning from Ache, Masan, Oho Abina Antien Bit Nazla. We also learned from the community, within the community level of whether it's at the chapter, whether it's with the Bebenand, our grazing officials. They have a lot of stories associated with land and how to be able to learn from those different areas as community-based education. Education for sustaining sustainability practices that exist within, here at the college we have the land grant. They have really good internship program and summer youth programs that encourage a lot of our kids to learn about the land, to learn how to work with the livestock and to be stewards. Those are some of those programs that exist out there. And the second one is environmental education. There's programs here of environmental studies, environmental biologists, and how they play a role within the ecosystem of ways to learn. And this is one of the areas that we saw like Monday, right, with Earth Day. Being able to have service to learn and service to the environment, service to the land. And there's a lot of programs that exist out there like AmeriCorps, volunteership programs. Those are opportunities for young people, for adults, community members to contribute to of how to learn and how to grow together as a community. And so one of the things that we had out in our handouts was with the treaty, otherwise known as the treaty. And if you look at Article 2, there's one thing that sticks out that we've discussed and our executive director always reminds our community members about is Article 2 within the United States agrees to the following district of country to wit reservation, and the same is hereby set apart for the use and occupation of the Navajo tribe of Indians, and the United States agrees that no person shall ever be permitted to pass over, settle upon, or reside in the territory described in this article. So when we take that back to the Nippenahazani fundamental law, before this treaty existed, there was a group of Na'ani that had a discussion, that was shared amongst those leaders. And as they return home, they noticed, they recognized certain areas of the land that existed. One of the first things that they saw was So'otzik, and that emotion that came to them, that's described in some of the Biyin and Hanet, the stories and the songs, that emotion that they shared, once they saw that, they felt better, they felt safe, they felt, content that they recognized land, that they recognized home. And with that goes into going back to that emotion that they felt and, not taking for granted these lands, not taking for granted these mountains, these natural elements that existed, but being able to contribute for future generations to come when it comes to that. And so as we close out today, my presentation, and we're talking about, integrating Diné Behezani with Diné land governance, the significance of it. The traditional oral histories of land that existed. The ceremonial knowledge and the ceremonial teachings that existed within these Diné land governance. The clan histories, the clan stories that are associated within our community areas. The history of our people from Hajine and all the way through Hajine onward. And the big part of it that sticked out when thinking about this presentation and thinking about the significance of Diné land governance is Diné Bagan Benako Ya Danitsengo Awebits E No Tatishchigo. What it means for Diné place as part of our life. How does Diné land governance apply to yourself as an individual? The umbilical cord that you place within the land, and to always recognize where you come from, where you're going, but always to know that's where home is, that's where my community is, that's where the sheep was, that's where home is. So when you think about the Diné land governance, where is your home? And we get questioned a lot, Hashtonen, Hadenanna, sort of grandma and grandpa's interrogation, right? They want to know where you're from, they want to know where your clans are. What is the significance of where you live? And what is that understanding there? Because they want to establish that Kehwins and Keshnits, and they want to establish that with you. And they want to acknowledge you as Nsui, Ne'owe, Niyaje, and have that understanding for Diné land governance. So, just wanted to share that today when it comes to Diné Behezani, and as students, we always get told, where's your reference? Where did you cite this from? Or where does this come from? And one of the things Dr. Ami always talks about here is, don't be afraid to reference Diné Diné, because that's where it comes from. Don't be afraid to reference Hastui Dosani, Ache, Masanen, Anela Hastkin, Anela Asta. Don't be afraid to reference them, because that's how we're shifting a lot of Indigenous research, right? Diné research, of understanding these relationships we share with other people and giving back and referencing where it comes from. So I just wanted to say that, and Nits'áá